Secretary Lonnie Bunch, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be with you.
Thank you for being with us to talk about this incredible space that we are in and America's 250th birthday. Let's start with where we are right now, the Smithsonian Castle. Part of it's under renovation, but you have reopened it to mark this milestone for the country, America's 250th birthday. Why is this such a special place? Why did you want to reopen it right now?
Well, the castle was really the Smithsonian for almost 30 years. That it was built in 1855, and all the research, all the exhibits, all the science was here. And this has really been the heart of the Smithsonian, but it was also the heart of Washington. Nothing else was here. So could you imagine looking down from Capitol Hill and all you could see is this amazing red building? And so what I wanted, as we're doing all this renovation, I said, let's, for the 250th, let's bring the joy of the Smithsonian. Let people see the heart of the Smithsonian. So it was really the desire to sort of open it and then to craft exhibitions that might help people understand the 250th a little more.
Yeah, the American aspirations is what you have called the special exhibit in honor of America 250. What do you hope people learn from it, and what emotions do you feel?
Well, you know, for me, it's really important for people to understand that America is as much an ideal as it is a place, that it's a series of aspirations that have really shaped who this country is. And so for me, what is so powerful is to say, let us honor the words of Thomas Jefferson and the founders, but let us use those to challenge us to be better. In some ways, the Declaration of Independence is aspirational, the pursuit of freedom, of fairness, of opportunities. So what America has done over the last 150 years is say, how do we make that concrete? How do we make that real? How do we make that available to the largest group of people? So the exhibition is really about understanding that America is a process and that there's nothing wrong with saying we can be better, because that's what's been happening for 250 years.
As the secretary of the Smithsonian Museums, I wonder what you feel when you sit in this space, the original Smithsonian Museum.
Well, on the one hand, you feel the weight of history in interesting ways. I'm the 14th secretary, so there are 13 other people that have had this role. That's it, in 180 years. So you feel that weight. But candidly, you also feel the weight as an African American, to say that you want to make sure that people celebrate you being the first, you want to make sure you're not the last. And so I feel the weight of history in that way.
Well, you got to go through the nation's history in a very specific and very tactile way. You've reviewed items from the American Revolution, slavery, the 2 world wars, up until modern day, up until now. What was that process like?
Well, you know, the Smithsonian has 155 million objects, and to figure out how do you just get a few? Because what I wanted was, unlike most of the exhibitions I've done, which are really grand, hundreds of objects, I really wanted this to be an intimate experience. I wanted the public to be able to get close to the objects, to really see it and to think about it, have the conversations that will change them. And that ultimately what I hope will happen is that people will now realize that there are iconic relics that help us understand who we are, and that hopefully this exhibition will challenge them to go to other exhibitions throughout the Smithsonian. But most importantly, to think about who we once were. What does that tell us about who we are today? But really, how does it challenge us for a better future?
And in all of the artifacts and all of your studies of this nation's history, what does it tell us about who we are today as we prepare to mark America's 250th birthday?
Well, you know, if you think about the bicentennial, and I hate to say I was old enough to be around during the bicentennial, but remember that this was a time of division. We're coming out of Vietnam and Watergate. And so what happened is the bicentennial really focused on a nation of nations. It allowed us to understand our diversity, our complexity. And for almost 20 years after that, that's how America thought of itself. So for me, the 250th ought to be an opportunity for us to admit that there are challenges, but to find common ground, to really find the notion that pursuit of possibility is what the Declaration of Independence is really about. And that, in essence, people have voted, debated, died, protested in order to make real those words. And I want people to recognize they have a commitment to making those words real, but also a commitment to finding that common ground that has helped us be this American nation for 250 years.
And again, the exhibit is called American Aspiration. What does American aspiration mean to you?
To me, it means that we are always in pursuit. We are in pursuit of the promise of America, that in essence, we almost never get there, and that's okay. That the notion of being a more perfect union, not the perfect union, is really what motivates me. And I think what I want people to understand is that there is a responsibility to continue to make those aspirations available, accessible, meaningful to a whole range of people. And that in essence, America's greatest strength, it's not running away from its history, but it's understanding how that history shaped us and continues to shape us. I'm always struck that when I think about why history matters, I think of sort of Joe Louis, the great boxer, was having a bout with a younger fighter, and they said, "How are you going to do this?" And he said, "He can run, but you can't hide." And I think that's what I feel about history. You can run from, but you can't hide. It shapes the way our cities are. It shapes our identity. And so what this exhibition does is help you understand how those aspirations, as old as they are as current as we are today. And that in essence, history is as much about today and tomorrow as it is about yesterday.
Well, I want to talk about your personal history a little bit. You are the third Lonnie Bunch, and the first Lonnie Bunch set the bar very high and met a number of challenges as he tried to pursue his dreams and his goals in life. Tell us about the first Lonnie Bunch.
The original Lonnie Bunch.
The original Lonnie Bunch, and how he has brought you to where you are today.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's an example of how two people, my grandfather and grandmother, can change the trajectory of a family.
Yes.
I mean, this guy was a sharecropper and outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and decided this is not the life he wanted. And he found out that he could go to Shaw College in North Carolina, and it took him 10 years to graduate college. And then he wanted to be a dentist. Why? We don't know. Right? I have no idea. He has to earn money, so he works on the boardwalk of Atlantic City, pushing rolling chairs of rich people to make money, gets that money, goes to Howard University for dental school. And basically, he practices in New Jersey for 50 years. And my recollections of him, he died the day before I turned 5. And my recollections are that he used to read history to me. He used to talk about history. And so I think part of my fascination came from him, from this sense of, as he said to me once, we were reading a book and there were pictures of school children. And he said that the picture was so old that these kids are probably no longer with you. And I was stunned by that. And then he said words that really shaped my life. He said, "Isn't it a shame people could live their lives, die, and the caption says unidentified?" And I have tried to give voice to the anonymous, to make visible the invisible my entire career. So really, it's Doc's notion of basically saying you can be more than you are. And the challenge is, when I was a kid, you'd come home and you'd say, "Oh my God, school was hard," or "This girl broke my heart." And my father would say, "Your grandfather went to college for 10 years. So buck up."
What do you think your grandfather would say if he were sitting here today and saw everything that you have accomplished and this extraordinary museum and the fact that you are the first Black secretary of the Smithsonian Museums?
Wow, I think in a way he would be astonished from the world that he came from. His parents were enslaved. To think about how in 3 generations this has happened. So I think he would be astonished. But I think the other thing he would be proud of America, proud of a nation that can come out of slavery and Jim Crow and civil rights to basically say it's possible for someone like me to be part of this amazing group called the Smithsonian. So I think he'd be really pleased that America has lived up to his dream.
And as the first African-American secretary of the Smithsonian, what perspective do you think you bring to this role?
I think I bring the perspective both being Black and a historian. And part of that is that I really want the Smithsonian to have a contemporary resonance, right? To recognize that the Smithsonian is this amazing reservoir of science, of art, of history, of culture. And I want the public to be able to dip into that reservoir to use it, to find understanding, to find clarity, maybe even to find a little hope. So for me, it is saying that we are a place that you can go back and revel in your past and learn about dinosaurs. But we're also a place that says this is an opportunity for you to better understand yourself. And the Smithsonian wants to contribute to that understanding.
Well, let's talk about the Museum of African American History and Culture. You are the founding director. I have visited it multiple times. Every time I go, I learn something new. I feel something new. Talk about what that role meant to you and building that museum literally from the ground up.
Well, in some ways, I took great sustenance from my grandfather. I thought, if this guy could go to college for 10 years, I could give 11 years of my life to build a museum. So it really was an opportunity that scared me to death. I didn't think I was good enough to do it, to be perfectly honest. But I realized that this was an opportunity not to build an African American museum like I would have done it 40 years ago, but to basically say, this is a story of a community, but it's also the story of a nation. And I wanted people to understand that this was their story too, regardless of who they were. And so putting in the time, finding amazing people to help make this dream come real was what motivated me. And I kept hearing from John Lewis, the great congressman, who for 17 years tried to pass legislation, finally got it through. And so whenever I would feel, oh my God, can I do this? I'd look to John Lewis. I'd look to his courage during the civil rights movement, his creativity on the Hill, and basically I said, you don't have the right to fail because they didn't. You're standing on the shoulders of your father, your grandfather, so therefore, every time I wanted to quit, I said, nope, got to keep going.
You mentioned John Lewis. I'm curious, who else outside of this world did you seek counsel from?
Well, there were a lot of people on the Hill who were very supportive, but I opened the doors to John Lewis, in all honesty. But also what I was really struck by was that there were amazing people like Oprah Winfrey, or Dick Parsons, who was the head of Time Warner, or Ken Chenault, who was the head of American Express. All of these people recognized how special this opportunity was, that the Smithsonian is the place where the world comes to understand what it means to be an American. And to have that museum would enrich people's understanding of America, not just celebrate a culture, but help us better understand who we really are. And so that excited me to be able to work with gifted people, but I gotta be honest, it was terrifying. I think of the very first meeting I had to go to, and I'm walking down the stairs and they sit me between Oprah and Ken Chenault, and I'm going, what am I doing? I'm just a kid from Jersey, And I realized though that what they wanted was what I wanted, was to build a place that would help America remember, build a place that would be here forever, that would make sure that as long as there's an America, there's a chance to hear that story.
You talk about the challenges of trying to strike the right balance in the museum. What were those challenges? How did you face them?
I spent years interviewing people around the world, trying to figure out what they knew, what they wanted, and I was really shaped by an experience I had early in my career. There was a man named Princey Jenkins who was a sharecropper in South Carolina. And I spent time with him because he helped me understand slavery and a slave cabin, et cetera. But he said to me after a day, he said, I'm not sure what a historian is, but maybe if you're good, your job is to help people remember not just what they want to remember, but what they need to remember. And so that notion of trying to find that balance of giving people the celebratory things they want, but also giving them the challenge of slavery and segregation and helping people understand that the strength of a nation is people crossing boundaries to help each other. So it really was understanding what people wanted. And what was funny is the number one thing people wanted to know about was slavery, and the number one thing they didn't want to know about was slavery. So that told me we needed to begin foundationally to help people understand that slavery wasn't just an African American story, it was a quintessential American story. So I think it was really trying to do that. And then what I would do during the process is I think the curators went crazy because I put my fingerprints on everything, but I would say, all right, let's look at what does this tell us about Black America? What does this tell us about America? What does this tell us about hope? What does this tell us about challenges? So I would basically look at every exhibition through that lens to make sure that no one who went through the museum would feel that this wasn't their story. And that was really an important goal.
Well, many of the artifacts there are from a project you created called Saving African American Treasures. Talk to me about what that process was like, and I know you went all around the country to do it.
Well, I remember testifying before Congress, and they said, "Can you find the artifacts?" And I remember saying, "Sure." I didn't know if I could. And so I realized that I remembered early in my career, I was collecting for something, and I went into this woman's house. And she had this treasure trove of stuff and didn't know what it was. And so I thought to myself, I bet that there is artifacts, history, stories embedded in people's homes. And so I created this project where we went around the country, and basically the goal was to help people preserve their collections. We didn't go to take things. We brought people to help you preserve grandma's old shawl or that 19th century photograph. But of course they then did say, oh, we've got this material. And I would say always, well, first of all, let's think about how it goes locally to your local museums. But if it was really cool, it's coming back to Washington, right? And so basically what is powerful to me is we collected 40,000 objects, of which 70% came from basements, trunks, and attics of people's homes. 70% came from people who said, we trust the Smithsonian, take this material and let the public see it. That to me was why it was so special. The people trusted us. And I used to tell my staff all the time, you're not building a museum. You're holding people's culture, people's hands, people's hopes in your hands. And I want you to treat it with that kind of respect.
And when you're in the museum, you are transported. You are having an experience. And part of that is because of all of that work you put into it. So you found Ku Klux Klan robes, for example. You found drinking water, segregated drinking fountains. What was that process like it must have been emotional every time you encountered one of those artifacts.
Very emotional. I mean, I think that I told my staff, it's okay to cry because you're dealing with things that are difficult, but I want you to find the resiliency and the joy that is in that. So we really said you got to do both, but we would get collections. For me, it was getting material on Harriet Tubman. Right? I mean, Harriet Tubman, great abolitionist, but I knew there wasn't any material. And a wonderful collector called me from Philadelphia and said, I've got material on Harriet Tubman. And I said, no, you don't. You don't. Come on, I don't believe it. And he said, well, come to Philadelphia. I'll buy you a cheesesteak and, we'll see. So I went up, and this guy, Charles Bloxon, gifted man, was 6'3", big guy. And he pulled out a little box, and in it he pulled out photographs of Harriet Tubman's funeral that I had never seen. And I said, oh my goodness. And he said, you're excited, and then he would punch me. He would share his excitement by punching me. He pulled out 33 objects and punched me every time. Oh. And the last one was this hymnal that Harriet Tubman had, where it was all those spirituals where she would sing into the South to help people escape. Swing low, sweet chariot, steal away Jesus. So I'm crying, right? I'm just so emotional. And I said, okay, what's it gonna take for this to come to the Smithsonian? Because I've got no money. And he said, shake my hand and it's yours. And that's what happened time and time again. People realized that this was the moment for these stories to be told. And that happened almost every day. Somebody said, here it is. Can you use it? Can you share it? Can you make it accessible?
We are living in polarized times. I don't have to tell you that. How does the Smithsonian fit into this moment and help the country move through this moment?
I think the Smithsonian, in some ways, is the glue that helps hold a nation together, right? You look at who visits the Smithsonian, everybody. Red states, blue states, whatever your politics, you come to the Smithsonian. Why? Because you want to understand who you are. You want to get excited about science and technology. You want to go to the Air and Space Museum and understand Amelia Earhart or how we got to the moon. You want to go to American history and see the original Star-Spangled Banner, to see those sort of icons of our history. You want to go to natural history and suddenly realize more about dinosaurs, climate change, et cetera. So that in essence, the Smithsonian really is a place that for 180 years has simply tried to help America understand itself. And that's why I think it's so important. There is, when you go through the Smithsonian, 90% of it is, right down the middle, right? It's about celebrating, but also understanding. And in some ways, what I think the country could use, what the Smithsonian provides is, we spend, as many Americans, we look for simple answers to complex questions. The Smithsonian gives you ambiguity. It helps you understand complexity, nuance, subtlety, debate. And I think that that's a major contribution. If you could help people feel comfortable with ambiguity, then you could help a nation move forward. So I think the Smithsonian has a role that's just, yes, great museums, come see the stuff. But it's also a place driven by research, by science, and in essence, our job for 180 years is just simply say, how do we help?
What is your message to the country as it prepares to mark this 250th birthday, this major milestone?
That we should look at this milestone for what it is. We should have the courage to celebrate the founding words of a Jefferson, because those words are powerful. But we also should have the courage to recognize those words are foundational, but only the beginning of a journey. And that journey has really been something that has challenged us, has cost us to have loss, but it also has allowed us to sort of evolve as a nation. So I guess for me, if I would say to the public, what do you want to come away with? Come away with America is a work in progress. We are an evolving nation, and that's okay, because I don't know where we'll be in 100 years, but my sense is with the foundations that we have, with the belief of many people saying we too can make America better, I feel we can do that.
Secretary Lonnie Bunch, thank you so very much for this conversation.
It's my pleasure.
We really appreciate it. It's so wonderful to see you, as always.
Thank you. You're
really
the best.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Really appreciate it. It was perfect. Thank you.
Well.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.